You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hi, Justin. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good today, I think.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah. It's early.
Still early.
It's still early.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
Yesterday I was able to go see a brand new bird to me.
Nice.
One that is not common around here. So that was just a really fun morning, kind of camping out, waiting for it to show up. And then it showed up. And yeah, just a fun way to kind of take advantage of a nice Saturday morning and just kind of,
I love that you have this hobby or whatever. Would you call it a hobby?
I think it's a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. That you can like be outside and you can, it's exciting and it's lovely and it's taking advantage of like the nature around you. You know what I mean? And I just am happy for you that you have that in your life.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that you saw doing.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
What about you? How has your week been?
Can I say shit show on the air?
Yeah,
I just did.
You just did.
Yeah, it was a little rough. So we had a day this week where I don't remember if I talked about this, but a couple months ago, Sean had some blurred vision, which sent him to an eye doctor. The eye doctor noticed a little like tiny lesion on the top of his lower eyelid. So sort of in between where the eyelashes are and where the eyeball is, that little ridge there.
Right.
So sent him to an eyelid specialist, which who even knew that existed, right?
Right.
And so we saw the eyelid specialist this week, and that guy ended up seeing lesions on both eyes in kind of the same spot in both places and taking biopsies of both of his eyelids while he's awake.
Right.
So I'm not going to go into too many details so our listeners don't stop listening, but I'll just say, think about how to numb how people typically numb things and think about that happening to your eyelid, and then think about scissors. Right. And something that Sean said that I hadn't thought of is there's no way to look away, right? When it's in your eyes. You can't close your eyes, right? You have to see it coming at you. So that was terrible.
Yeah.
And then that was at like 7:30 in the morning that day. Then I went to a funeral for a friend's dad, which in some ways was actually kind of cathartic because it was like, I didn't know anyone. I sat quietly and I was able to like sing and pray and whatever. So it was actually more cathartic than I thought, but still. And then we had to go back to the same clinic that afternoon because he's had all these issues with his G-tube. It was removed. And usually they panic that the hole will close like immediately.
Oh,
I mean, they panic if it falls out because they're like, oh no, it's going to close. But this happened in July, like 2 months ago now, and the hole still has not closed.
Oh.
And so again, I'm just going to gross everybody out here this morning, but like, you think about that. So like the stomach stuff's coming out of this little hole and your stomach has stomach acid. And so that's burning the skin on the outside. So he is in lots of pain. Yeah. And so we've been trying to get that figured out. So we went back to that doctor. So we had to go back to the same clinic twice in one day, which was just terrible. And that doctor has like the worst bedside manner of all time. And the way they're trying to treat it is by burning it with silver nitrate. So in one day, this poor man had these two eyelid biopsies and his stomach burnt in one day.
That's terrible.
It is terrible. It's terrible. And then since then, we have found out that both of the eye spots are precancerous. And I don't know what they would do if it was a, quote, typical person. But for him, for sure, they're just going to treat it as cancer.
Right.
And do a terrible procedure to remove them. So we are just in the moment of like, we got the MyChart message with the results, having it spoken to a medical professional.
Right.
Don't have a plan. I mean, we think we know what they're going to do and it's going to be hideous.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we are with that.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, so many times I've been like, okay, this is the worst possible place for a biopsy. No, this is the worst possible place. This has to win.
Right.
I can't think of any. The other ones now just feel like a cakewalk in comparison to this eyelid thing. So, yeah. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but on our crew or from our cruise, we think he got COVID.
Oh.
And now we never like confirmed it because it was the home test was negative, but he had all the symptoms and he was sick and coughing for like 2.5, 3 weeks. Oh. So we think that it was COVID. So, I mean, fortunately, it never got like severe.
Yeah.
It's just more that it's been really long lasting.
Right.
So poor guy has just been through it lately. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then you also, I mean, you're going through it alongside him. Like that's not the stuff that may be physically happening to him, but you're there in the room. You are caring for him outside of the medical offices. And that's a lot for you too.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's a lot. So something that we did that night. So I had the day of all those terrible appointments. Someone had offered me one ticket to the Brandi Carlile concert at the Minnesota State Fair. Now, if you don't know Minnesota State Fair, I think is maybe the biggest one in the nation. It's like, it averages like 190,000 people a day. It's ridiculous.
That's a big fair.
It's a big fair. And it's like 10 minutes from our house.
Oh, wow.
And I love Brandi Carlile. So someone had offered me one ticket and I was like, so all day I had been like, do I go? Do I not? This is a hard day, And then Sweet Sean that afternoon was like, I think I'd like to go too. And I was like, whoa. So we looked online and we just like bought 2 tickets.
Right.
Together and went to the state fair. And we couldn't decide, is this the best idea we've ever had or the worst idea we've ever had? In the end, I would say it was probably the best. I will say that the day after I felt like garbage.
Yeah.
Which I probably would have anyway, but still we were just like out really late and,
Yeah.
But just like it was so cathartic to be in a space where like screaming was appropriate.
Right. Yeah.
Singing at the top of your lungs, dancing, crying, like, like pumping your fists in the air, like all of these things that like if I had stayed home, I probably would have like curled up and gone to sleep and which would have been good for me in a different way. Right. But I think there was something releasing about that. Plus her music is like, I love it. And it's like so soul filling. So it was really good.
Good.
And so something I thought maybe we could talk about today, because what a lot of people have said in response to that and in response to the fact that recently Sean and I were fortunate to go on a cruise. I think I talked about that last time, is that people are like, look at you. You're such an inspiration. Look at you like squeezing every ounce of joy out of life or something. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like there can be this pressure when you have lives like ours to this like carpe diem kind of thing. Right. Like when you know that your days are numbered, or that that like in your situation, like Sarah's good days, right? Like, they're not all good days. They're not guaranteed all good days, right? When you know that that's the case, there can be this pressure to like, almost like the bucket list thing.
Yeah.
Like I need to go climb the mountain and do the thing and enjoy the day and da-da-da. But also we're tired than the typical person.
Yes.
And so I thought today we could maybe talk about that, like the balance of like seizing the day versus being tired and like the pressure. And do we need to give into that pressure? Is it worth it to give into the pressure of like carpe dieming this thing or not? You know, like, is that worth it? So, what are your sort of initial thoughts when you're hearing that?
I think kind of as you mentioned, my relationship with that is different than I think your relationship with that, just because of the nature of our partner's illnesses.
Totally. Yep.
So I don't know that I feel the same level of external pressure.
Okay.
To like, you have to be making the most of every moment and, the bucket list kind of thinking. But I will say that there is, and it's with Sarah having more good days now, it's less than it used to be. But the sense that if Sarah's having a good day, like we have to make the most of that day. We have to, we can't waste it because we don't know, back in the day, it could be a month before she has another good day. And so you don't want to squander that. And so certainly there was pressure there, but it was mostly between us, I think, that we wanted to use that as best we could. So kind of one thing that we did is we would have kind of some ideas as to things we wanted to do. And then we didn't have to think on those days, okay, what should we do with this good day?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we want to, maybe it's get takeout from and enjoy a nice meal.
Yeah.
Sitting in bed because she's in bed, but being able to enjoy a nice experience together that's kind of reminiscent of something we would have done in the before times.
Sure. Yeah.
so that's a way that we kind of tried to seize the moment, I guess.
Sure. Did it feel like, I mean, that's so smart, because I think that, I mean, how many couples this has happened that it's like, you're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Where do you want to eat? What do you want? You know what I mean? And then pretty soon the night's over and you're like, well, that was fun. And so I think so wise of you to like have the list, right? Premeditate the list. But also, was it hard for you if a month went by with no good days to have this list of like, oh my gosh, all we really want to do is like get takeout in bed, and she can't even do that. Like, we have this list of things and we can't do them. Right? Was there that sense of it?
There may have been on some level, but I think at least when we were in the thick of it, so much was just going to surviving that it didn't feel like there was mental space to like have that kind of concern going on. I mean, there's certainly, maybe as things improved a little bit, so where we were less in like that survival state, it felt like certainly if there's a long run of bad days, it's like feeling the, these things that we wish we could be doing slipping through our fingers kind of feeling. We wanted to say, it's like we had plans to go out to a restaurant and she ended up having a bad day and it turns into a bad week. And it's like, all we wanted to do is go eat at a restaurant, and like that can't happen. And that's frustrating.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that can be part of it, right? Like, so if someone comes up with a bucket list, or even like for you, like it's a bucket list, but it's like a really, for most people, like would be a tiny bucket list, right? But if you have that, and then there's this like, we can't do it, right? And so I feel like it's this really tight-ropey kind of balance of like, oh, we want things to look forward to and to be able to go do, but also can it feel hard when we're like, well, not going to be, or for a family, if they get to a place where they're like, well, that was on the list, now we know for whatever reason that's never going to happen,
right?
Like, that's tricky, and I keep thinking about the word that you used. You said squander, and so you said like what if she has a really good day, we don't want to just like squander it away, right? And so it's this thing that we have to, this pressure. Is it like the pressure of like we have to seize it, we have to do something great? Or is it more of like, oh, we're going to take advantage? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, because I don't know, it just feels like sometimes is a day at home being cozy and whatever, squandering it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's, we can get in our head that we have to go out and do the things on those days. But I mean, having a day where Sarah was able to be present with me throughout the day, like that's a great day. That is a wonderful way to spend that day. We don't have to go anywhere. I mean, there were days where a good day of us spending time together was we would watch, one of her favorite movies that she's watched over and over again. And she would just be laying there with her eye mask on, just listening, because that's all she could do.
Sure.
And so like then to have a day where she is able to be sitting up and conversing easily, like those moments were not wasted at all.
Right.
Yeah. There's certainly a kind of scale to things to think about, that like it doesn't have to be seizing the day, doesn't have to be these grand things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say about these. It's like almost like a mindset shift. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you feel okay? Okay, let's go.
Right.
Let's get in the car. Let's go. Do. Right.
Yeah.
And that I saw someone the other day said something like, I think that the tiny moments can bring us just as much joy as the big moments.
Right.
And so even thinking about like the other night, like the three of us, we've been watching Bridgerton together.
Okay.
The three of us. And, and that's a way that like, then like we're all lined up on the couch together and Maya's all snuggled up together. And the three of us all have our little hands in a little pile in the middle. You know what I mean? That's like beautiful.
Yeah.
Right. And if we were out, like, let's say the three of us were like, let's go to the fair. I mean, it's an experience to say the least, but it's not like necessarily like a closeness bonding. You know what I mean? And so I think for us to realize that like seizing the day and having these moments and moments that you're going to remember later or appreciate later doesn't have to be an event.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be out of the house. It doesn't have to be, like Instagrammable or whatever, right? It's just like those might not even be the things later. But I think that especially in our like Instagram life, it can feel like that. Like if it's not like a pretty picture, you know, then it can feel like, oh, well, did I squander the day?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Something else I'm kind of thinking about is so we maybe feel this pressure internally, right? But I think we can also experience that, I can think, as kind of you alluded to, as like an external pressure from people around us, whether that's them, you know, noting that we did something and like saying how like what a great job you did seizing the day or making the most of that, and like, well, we should be doing more of that. Or whether that's like hearing that you should be going out and doing more things. And I think that part of that can be because I think that you have to be realistic. Like I talked about making this list of like things you can do when there's a moment. Like you have to be realistic in that list.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to put Disneyland on that list.
Right.
That's just,
yep.
But I think that what can happen a lot of times is there is this mismatch of perception between what we know is realistic and what the people around us maybe fully don't understand the situation or haven't come to terms with the situation themselves, and like they're encouraging you to do things that are beyond what is actually realistic. And I think there can be real tension there. Because they may be suggesting things and not understanding that, like, well, no, yes, that would be a great experience, but like we can't. Yeah. That's too much.
Right.
And having to navigate those external expectations as well.
Yeah. The other thing that you and I have talked about a lot is I think then the perception of people of being like, oh, Sean's well enough to go on a cruise.
Yeah.
And to a concert. Great. He must be cured. Fantastic. Right. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's not, I think our community is well informed enough to be beyond that, I hope. But there's certainly that fear.
Right.
Of being like, wait a minute. It must not have been that bad of a day at the doctor if he could go to a concert afterwards. And it's like, do you understand though that like on the park and ride bus, like there were no seats left and I had to like brace him, you know what I mean? Like hold him up basically, you know, like, yeah, we went to a concert and it took a lot out of both of us and it was a good idea, but also maybe it was a terrible idea, you know, because the other thing I think about too, for anybody, but I think especially with people who have like ME, CFS, right? Tell me if I'm wrong about this, but is that like sometimes the fear can be if you exert yourself, that can lead to like a flare or a crash, right? Yeah. And so it's sort of like, okay, you're having a good day. But if you do something, is that going to lead, or the repercussions of doing the thing going to be worth it? Because then they might just totally be like flat out afterwards, right? Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you have to evaluate, is this thing worth the potential of that for sure? And that's not easy math to do all the time.
Right. Because you can't predict, right?
Right.
And I mean, same thing even for me. Like I knew like I'm probably going to feel like garbage the day after this. Yeah. And I absolutely felt like garbage. Yeah. Right. But then in the end, I was like, okay, I still think it was worth it. You know, or even the cruise, like, okay, so we went on this cruise. We had 8 great days, and then he coughed for like 15 days.
Yeah.
right. And so you have to kind of be doing the math that, quote, typical people don't have to do about what might be the fallout of this. Yeah. Of doing this great thing.
Right.
And I think that that's the other thing that people don't see. Right. Is they just see like the picture of you at the concert and they're like, wow. And they don't see the picture of you the next day dragging and, you know, like needing all the caffeine and like barely making it through your meetings, you know? Yeah. So there's that piece too. Like it's easy to be like, seize the day, do the things, right? We have this friend who has the same disease as Sean and he's around the same age as well. And a couple years, maybe like 5 or more years ago at this point, when he sort of realized like, okay, this is how this disease works. He and his wife sold all their belongings and moved to Mexico. And they like live this like island life and they like surf and swim. And I don't know. Cause I think he thought like, maybe I'll have like a year or 2. And now it's been like 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And sometimes I see that and I'm like, should we be like living on the ocean? Right. But also I wonder for him, is he like, if he had known he's still going. Yeah. Right. Would he I mean, sound looks like his life is great, but of course it does because he's like living in the ocean. But like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So then there's that piece, like that. There's that kind of extreme as well of like, okay, well, if my days are limited, off I go to live my best life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can sometimes be like, wait, are we not living our best life enough?
Mm-hmm.
Are we not? You know what I mean? Taking advantage enough of that? And I don't know the answer.
Well, yeah. And it's clearly different for everybody.
Sure. Yes, of course.
And I mean, this is getting back to what we just talked about in our last episode with comparison.
Right. Right.
And how easy it is to see what other people are doing and think, am I doing the right thing or should I be doing this instead? And
yeah,
we're all in our own situations, and what we need and what is the best fitting, what fits the situation best is going to be different for everybody.
Yeah.
So like that, I think, is something to keep in mind here as well.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Something else I'm kind of thinking of is, so, we're talking about this kind of pressure to make the most of every day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We're also, that how are we kind of like logistically maybe making that happen a little bit, like the list that Sarah and I have or something like that. But I think too, like this is I think fully accepting your situation is kind of part of getting to this point where you feel like you can, okay, we're going to make the most of these. This is how we're going to find beauty and carve out these little moments in our lives. Because I think there's a lot of work and processing that gets to the point where it's like, okay, this is where we're at. Let's make it as beautiful as we can. And we're kind of skipping over a lot of that. I mean, we talk about a lot of that earlier stuff and a lot of our other stuff that we've talked about. But I mean, so I don't want to like say or ignore that.
Sure.
But that's like we're not talking about that today as much.
About the grief and
about the grief and all of that goes into like, okay, finally, this is where we're at. What do we do? Because it's kind of that moment is like you have a choice of how you're going to carry forward, I guess. And there's numerous ways to do that. And there may be multiple right ways for you to do that in your own life. I don't think that's another. Yeah. There's just so much pressure to be like, okay, we have limited time or we have limited good days. Like, how do we, we just feel like, how do we not waste it? And like you said earlier, like a day at home being cozy is not wasting it. So I think there's that perspective shift that needs to come in, which is important. But I think too, there is a spontaneity that has to be there too. Ability for that, which for me was something I had to learn because I, by my nature, am not a spontaneous person at all. And so like getting used to, I was going to do, I don't know, maybe the day was going to be the day I did laundry and picked up around the house.
Right.
Suddenly Sarah has a good day. All of that goes out the window.
Yep.
And we're doing something that we have an opportunity to do something together. And so we're going to do that. And so being able to make those shifts isn't always easy. That took some work for me to learn how to do that. Yeah.
This is going to be shocking to you. I am also like that.
Really?
I am terrible when the plans change.
Yeah.
Which you would think I would have learned over the years because the plans are constantly changing. But when I think the day is going to go a certain way and then it doesn't, I am like a toddler. It just doesn't go well. And so I just want to insert that. Yes, I understand that even if it's like for a good reason, sometimes it's like, but if we go to that park because you're feeling well enough and you feel like you can go outside and take a walk, will the laundry get done?
Right.
When it's like, what? Of course it will.
Yeah.
I think that, and something that you, I think, are circling around a bit is that I don't want to be all like hashtag gift, right? But like a gift, I will say, of this that I have found of living this chronic illness life is the perspective, right? So I think that I have a perspective and an appreciation for life, right? And for moments that I don't think I would have otherwise.
Yeah.
So even moments of like, especially I think probably moments of like Maya and Sean together, like those moments to me are like gold. And I think otherwise I would be like, well, it's just my kid and her dad or whatever. But I think that there are these precious, precious moments that I wouldn't like otherwise, I think, appreciate as much.
Yeah.
And so I think that both sort of recognizing them as they're happening, but then also like, I don't know if it's all about like, do we have to make them? I don't know. But I think that we just can appreciate these things more because we have that understanding. And so I think that like when you realize that good days or days in general are numbered, you don't necessarily need to manufacture a bucket list and then be like, let's go out and do the things. But part of it is just like starting to be aware and recognize the good things that are happening.
Yeah.
Those little micro moments of joy or peace or whatever that is, or closeness that are happening that we, I think, have an appreciation of in a different way than a person who maybe doesn't know, or doesn't have kind of this thing going on in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think too that hearing that, find these beautiful moments, like, yes, there are beautiful moments, like this gives you perspective to see those beautiful moments, like that could be read as a little bright-sidey, but like these things exist because of terrible things. And this beauty exists alongside of terrible things. And it's this like, it's not this one or the other. It is a very complicated dynamic that is not easy to navigate all the time.
For sure. And I think they're directly correlated. Like, I think that like the more grief we experience, the more joy we're able to experience. Like it has felt like that in my life, that because I think that the more one end opens, the more the other end opens, because you've experienced so much of one end. And I just saw this quote about like, about grief, that you can't like put a kink in the hose and shut off the grief, because then you're also shutting off the joy.
Interesting.
And so like, you just need, like, the things need to flow through, right? You need to feel it.
Right.
But I think that you're right. I'm not saying like every life is beautiful, every moment is beautiful. I'm saying life is so hard. And the hardness of life, in my experience, has helped me to be more aware of and appreciative of the beautiful moments that I think otherwise would have just like gone by, and I wouldn't have even like realized it. Yeah. If that makes sense,
Yep.
There's this years ago, because my brain is just always like zing, always. It's real fun in there. Super fun. That I remember saying to this like yoga friend of mine, I was like, I wake up, and like the second I wake up, my brain is already like, what am I doing today? And how it is. And I was like, it's terrible to wake up like that. And so she taught me this like mantra of just this. And she's like, inhale on just and exhale on this. And it is good for me in the moment, like whether that's like right when I wake up and I just need to like, I don't need to think about what's happening at 10:30 this morning, right? Like just look, you're in this cozy bed, right? Like enjoy this moment, and you're just lying here. But also in those other beautiful moments, because I think that I, as a planner, can always just be like thinking of the next thing.
Right.
There's this really beautiful song. It's like, fish don't know that they're swimming. Birds don't know that they're singing. We don't know that we're living. Anyway, it's really beautiful. I'll try to find it. But anyway, part of it is like, I was at the Grand Canyon, but I couldn't see the beauty because I was too busy planning.
Right.
Right. So anyway, the point is that I feel like sometimes I will say for myself that I'm, even in the most beautiful moment, have a hard time being present, and I'm trying to be better at being present.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about the next thing, or thinking about like, is there something I could do to make this moment even better? And so part of it is like, that is seizing the day, right? Seizing the moment that you're in right now, and being present, and just being like, wow, here we are. Just this, just the fact that we are here together in this space right now, like that he's here and I'm here and she's here, like just this. We don't need Disneyland, like just this.
I like that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm certainly still working on it years later, but it's a really, I think, good practice to realize that like, that can be our bucket list. Our bucket list can be to work on being present with each other and appreciating each other. And also, I think though, that can feel like a lot of pressure, because there are going to be times that like your person makes you feel crazy, or you are mad at them, or like everything's terrible or whatever. And you don't have to be like, well, I can't be mad at them today because we're seizing the moment. Right? Like you still have to live real life.
Right.
And it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows.
So we're talking about like seizing these moments together, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate, like, there are things like personally that you would like to do that maybe are your own kind of thing.
Sure.
And, how do you not shut down those parts of your life that are enriching,
Yeah.
that bring you joy, that bring you life, and taking advantage of the times when you can do that, while also balancing and feeling like you're not taking the time for those moments away from the person you're caring for.
Yeah.
Because I think that can be if we're off doing something that we have the opportunity to do that brings us joy, like I think that guilt can be there. Like, I'm
Sure.
out enjoying myself, having this delightful time, and yet my person can't be here. Or should I be using this energy to spend time with them?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. And yet we need that fulfillment in our own lives too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a
No,
tricky balance.
that's a really good question. And actually, a caregiver just asked me something similar to that the other day because their person they thought was going to have a pretty short-term prognosis.
Right.
And so they had sort of set themselves up for like, this is the way these next few like months are going to go. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now things are going really well. So it's a longer term prognosis, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's also this huge mindset shift.
Right.
And so the caregiver is trying to figure out, do I take that job? Do I not, and like, how do I make decisions?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I was saying in response to that question was about, first of all, let's think about who's telling you should go take that big job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like society that says like, okay, as long as you can, you should go work 40 hours a week? Because I was like, you shouldn't,
Right.
like even if you don't have to, don't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I also was reminding like, on average, caregivers spend 25 hours a week caregiving.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, if you don't have to work 40 hours a week, don't do that, right? Because you're already going to be doing this other thing. But so I think it is that balance. How many times a episode do we say the word balance, right?
I don't know.
I think a lot, because I think we're always trying to teeter, right, on the sides of these. But I think so. It's like you don't want to put your life on hold because hopefully her person will like live forever, right? Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think we also don't want to like rush off into, because there is something like, I imagine that when they thought that it was just a couple of months that her person had to live, there was sort of like a really living in the present kind of thing that got to happen. And I feel like we don't want to like switch into, oh, well, if the prognosis is longer, then great, I'm going to go get a 40-hour-a-week job and just live, like work, right? Like we don't need to do that. And so I think that we can find somewhere in the middle where we're like living in the present and enjoying and thinking about the life we want to create, but also not just like waiting around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing I mentioned to her was just about the comparison, right? That I think we think, okay, at this age, I should do this and this and this and this. And to just try to, I know we're not good about that. We had to do a whole episode on it, but like to like throw that out the window of just because your peers might be at this place in their career doesn't mean you need to be. And so, yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
It doesn't matter. That was good insight.
That's a nice way of saying, no, you did not.
Well, no, I appreciate all that. One thing to kind of bring it back to my question a little bit, which was how do you work through these, doing things for yourself, having time and energy for your person. Right. I know that one thing that when Sarah was, doing much worse, I would take time from work rather than take time from her to do things for myself, because I had vacation time.
Sure.
We weren't going on vacation.
Yeah.
And so I would take a day off from work, which normally, a day that her mom was going to be over with her anyway. And so the day was no different to her, whether I was at work or off doing something for me.
Yeah.
And so maybe looking at the other things in your life that take energy or you're giving to, and can you swap amongst those to make space, to carve out space. And I think you have to, it's be creative sometimes. But I do think it's important to make that space for you and your dreams and such as well. And I think that like when you first start into like a caregiving role like this, you're in that trying to figure everything out, just overwhelmed by everything, but also yeah, I think you don't initially think I need to make sure that I have space to like do my own thing and I need to care for myself as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't do that initially, you get really far down the road and develop these really strong patterns and ways of working through everything. And then it feels like a huge shift to make that change. And so I guess if you're new in this role, like don't wait to try to find that space for yourself.
Right.
Because the sooner you can do that and make that a path that exists in your mind. And, you know, again, it doesn't have to be taking a trip for yourself. It can be
right.
having 30 minutes to read a book in a chair.
Well, that sounds nice.
Right.
Yeah.
But starting early, I think helps in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too that, you know, I think of it as if like, let's pretend your person slices their hand while cooking and then you have to go to the ER, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this really intense, let's say the ER is backed up. It's this really intense, like 10-hour ER experience. And if that's it, you can be all in. 100% caregiver, all in, don't leave their side, right? But for the rest of us, where it's this chronic thing, like we cannot be all in for this many years.
Yeah.
But I think that's often we feel like we need to be in as intensely as we would be if it was this 10-hour thing, right?
Yep.
But we can't.
Yeah.
And so how are the ways, like you said, that we can sort of extract? And I think too, like thinking about like the IanaCare app that I've talked about before, right? And so what are the things that we can take off our plates that aren't caregiving related so that we have that space and time?
Yep.
So I finally this week where we have a cleaning service coming.
Oh, wow.
And like, I feel a little weird. I don't know. I just feel like guilty about spending the money and weird about someone else cleaning my house, you know, like, but I just am like, you know what? There are hours in the day and only so much energy that I have. And if someone else can do this, then that is going to free up that time and energy that I can spend with Sean, that I can spend on work, that I can spend on myself, that I can spend with Maya. And so it's looking for those kinds of things that you can, you know, get the lawn service, get the whatever, ask your friends to bring you dinner once a week, like take up them up on their offer to help so that you have a little more space to do.
For sure.
Things, you know,
that's a great point.
Yeah. So what about our supporters?
Yeah. So for supporters, I think one, being aware that this seeming encouragement for us to go out and do things and have these great moments can really make us feel a lot of pressure. And to be aware of that and to kind of keep that in mind with what you're suggesting. I think being realistic about the limitations of the person who is ill and the caregiver, and not reading a opportunity or not reading into like they went to the fair, he's better,
right?
You know, those kind of things.
Yep.
I think, like you just said, as a supporter, if you can offload things from a caregiver to free up space and time, that's huge.
Yep,
that's huge. And I think there's something, and I don't know exactly how this plays out, but if there's a way you can help them to see and acknowledge the small, beautiful moments in the day, and I think that's we talked about with like that. Like, I don't know how you walk that exactly without that feeling like you're trying to bright side them.
I don't know that it's the supporter's role to do, you know, I don't know. Cause I feel like if the supporter's like, wow, look at that beautiful moment. I don't know. It's tricky.
Maybe it's something like if the caregiver is sharing that, you know, we had a lovely night in because when they had the energy to, you know, we could sit at the table and have dinner, and acknowledging that as that's lovely, not as a jumping off point to, oh, maybe now you can do this. Maybe now you can do this. Maybe that's the way to kind of like, to acknowledge when those are shared as a complete lovely thing in and of themselves.
Yeah. The other thing I'm wondering about, and I don't know how this would always work, but if there's anything supporters can do to sort of help, like even if it's like, I got you a little, I know you can't leave the house these days, so I got you a little like night in kit of like hot chocolate and popcorn and I don't know, you know, like, Or if somebody, like if I know if anyone's listening and has like a cabin, right? Like if someone was like, hey, I know that you can't always like fly off somewhere, but I have a cabin that's not that far away. And if you and Sean ever, and also, but if they could be cool about like, we don't know when that's going to happen and we might have to cancel, right? But like, if there are things like that people could be like, this might be a tiny thing, small thing that you could go do. And we'd love to help you be able to do that. Or, you know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah.
I think just one of the main things for supporters is to dial back on the like seize the day pressure.
Yeah.
And that language maybe.
Yeah. And for us to do that as well. For us to realize like getting through the day is seizing it sometimes, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And I think that just this, like, how can we look around and, those micro moments that we've talked about in the past, we've talked about micro moments for ourselves and in terms of like self-care, but how can we sort of look for those micro moments of loveliness in our life with our person, our people, that we can just be like, wow, like this is lovely right now. Like I am seizing the day and this is, in this way. So yeah. Okay. Thanks. I'm going to be swirling this around in my head for a while, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that means it's good, I think.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah. Well, listeners know that, as always, we will have a support group on this topic coming up. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to be added to the mailing list so that you know when the support groups are, just reach out to me at Allison@thenegativespace.life and I will add you to the mailing list. And we would love to have this conversation with you about what you think about all the stuff that we just talked about. So hope to see you there. And yeah, Justin, I hope that things continue to go well and more new birds are in your future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I hope as you've got some rough days ahead, I will be thinking about you and your family and hope that things can be as least terrible as possible through that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good hope. Least terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible possible. Yeah.
So,
yeah. All right. Thanks, friend. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.